Well, we continue with our rolling coverage from here at the Rock Center National, to be particular. I'm joined by Dr. Ongama Timka as well as Dr. Stembile Mbete, just to make sense of the numbers as they stand this very hour. To the both of you, welcome and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us.
No, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Perhaps to start with you, Dr. Mbete, just looking at the figures, the national picture currently.
Yes.
I mean, we've got the ANC sitting at the top at roughly 41%. You've got the Democratic Alliance at 22, I believe, and then you've got the MK party at around 12%, EFF just trailing behind at roughly 9%. I mean, this is almost accurate to the revised CSIR predictions. Literally, it looks quite similar. Your views on just this picture that we're seeing?
It's incredible. I was on air this morning with Professor Deva from CSIR, and yesterday when he had given us the predictions yesterday morning, you know, when we were sitting here with Sakina and Leanne, and he gave those predictions about the MK at 12% and the ANC at 41, and I said, no. I was like, that seems very strange. And those predictions have held up, and we are seeing that with 75% of voting districts declared, that prediction has held up.
But what are we to make of it? What does it mean insofar as the support of the MK party, Dr. Ongama?
It's significant. I think to me, first of all, there's a strong regional base, KwaZulu-Natal, Mpumalanga, and we see that cuts across also parts of the Eastern Cape and various parts throughout the country. What we must accept is that democracy delivers the results that people choose, and that's why it's democratic. Now, President Zuma is a popular person. The question that has always lingered is how far does that popularity go, and how consequential it would be in the politics of the ANC. Now, as they say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. We're now having the pudding, and we can see how that popularity is going to affect the ANC.
If I can pick up on that, one of the things that I've realized in terms of how differently the outcome has come to what we were sort of thinking before, we knew that the MK was going to make a huge dent in KwaZulu-Natal, but we were underestimating the impact of that dent at national level. And there's two things that are standing out about how that happened. The first one is that voter turnout in KwaZulu-Natal is much higher than in the rest of the country. So national turnout is at about 58%. In KZN, it's at about 62%. So more voters from KZN contributed to the overall turnout, and so it's far more highly weighted than what we would have expected, given that Gauteng, for example, it has the most number of registered voters. So that's the first thing, that the turnout in KZN was really, really incredible. The second thing is that the MK, although yes, it does have its regional support in KZN, we've seen in Mpumalanga, it's picked up votes across all 9 provinces. So even in the Western Cape, in the Northern Cape, they have some, they have a presence and they have a profile. And so the MK isn't just a regional phenomenon, it is also a national one, and that is what has contributed to what we see on the board today.
And then what are we to read into the EFF's numbers currently? Because when speaking to the media, Ompile Mawutra still was quite confident, saying it's early days. We've still got the metros, the numbers are still going to come, and we're going to see a completely different picture. She was actually of the view that the Democratic Alliance is going to dip a bit lower than what we're seeing currently. What do you make of just that statement and the EFF's overall performance thus far?
Look, I think that the EFF has got some thinking to do, and sort of going back to the drawing board to think about why it is that in the places where they should have had a far better performance in those metros, they didn't. I do think that the EFF was also affected by the Section 24A, that a lot of the EFF support base is transitory. It's not it's students, it's young people who move around for work, which is why, for example, we saw in 2014 the EFF made a big bang when they came in. They didn't perform as well as we thought they would in 2016. Then it was the same 2019, they performed really well. They didn't have as great performance in 2021. And remember, in local government elections, you have to vote where you are registered. And so that rule being applied at national and provincial level also affected the EFF. But that's not the IEC's fault. The EFF is one of the parties that voted for the change to Section 24A, and this is now the consequence of it.
Beyond that, Dr. Ongama, would you say that of those that are saying perhaps the EFF was hurt by the open borders conversation, is there any truth to this?
I think there will be some element of truth. The EFF, in fact, realized that, and later in its campaign kind of toned down on it. And Julius Malema and a few other leaders, in fact, tried to clarify what they mean by their more openness in terms of the country.
Dr. Ndlozi was actually among those who tried to clarify or better refine the message around the open borders.
Indeed, but the other thing we mustn't forget is that political parties grow in waves. Waves of rage, waves of big phenomena that pull people in big numbers. So a few things here. In 2014, it was clear the anger against the Zuma administration throughout that period. In 2019, it was the anger also by some loyal in the ANC to former President Zuma against Cyril Ramaphosa. So they benefited from what otherwise was anger against revenge, if you like.
So politics of grievances, which is what they say now is the benefit that is being enjoyed by former President Jacob Zuma here, that they could be aggrieved with how the economy has turned out, etc.
Absolutely. And then I wrote a piece on how the EFF in this election was searching for the next big swing. And that depended on getting the next big idea. They toyed around with the RET, and I think that from a future point of view, that was going to be a fatal move. I would say the EFF is at a liminal space. And at a liminal space, that's the space where you are doing a survival strategy, a strategy of how to remain alive so that you could allow the environment to present to you, again, that next grand moment that allows you to strike. I wouldn't panic if I was in any of the leadership of the EFF. They find themselves in the same position that the DA in 2019 was, where they needed to find, some constituency was abandoning them, and they needed something, a key message of how to attract the constituency they had been pursuing but was refusing to come to the party, or do what they did, which was to say, let's go back to the core constituency. And in this election, they are being rewarded in some ways, because as I was looking at the results, they've pushed out the Freedom Front Plus. So the point I'm making is that the EFF is in that same space. All they can do is to play a wait-and-see game while surviving.
Dr. Mbete, your take on just the DA's performance, that here in 2019 we had heard from Helen Zille that they had toyed around with the race conversation and it was to their detriment, that it was a wrong call to make. They wanted to be extremely multiracial. Yes, they continue to be among the very diverse political parties racially, but they lost that core voter to FF+, as Dr. Ongama states. Now it seems that the decision to move away from the racial politics is working for them. But unfortunately, within the multi-party charter, they seem to be the only ones that have done so well. Action SA, according to Cian Hazen, had promised them 10%. It's not coming. There's currently around 3%.
Look, the multi-party charter really allowed the DA in many ways to cannibalize its opposition. If you think about it, the smaller parties, FF Plus, Action SA, all of these parties were obvious already challenges to the DA's position as a slightly more centre-right party that could appeal to minorities. And basically by creating this multi-party coalition, it allowed the DA to set the terms of the campaigns of those smaller parties, that they would need to campaign in a way that would accommodate the DA and wouldn't challenge it too much. And what that's done is that it's allowed the DA to reconsolidate its base, to take back what support it lost in 2019 to the Freedom Front Plus and others, and also to then differentiate itself as its ideological position and all of those things. And the DA clearly, from 2019 to now, made it clear that it wasn't really interested in becoming a majority party, but it does want to be a very, very influential second or third biggest party that can then have a real say in the way that governments are formed, in the way that decisions are made. And I think the strategy's worked out well for them.
And to that point of that they never had the ambitions of being a majority party, because they actually have said that the ANC, having maintained that above 50% for 30 years, was an anomaly according to them. That really at this point, if they are to dip below 50, they're never returning. You have to coalesce at this point. Your take on just that statement of the Democratic Alliance, that it was an anomaly, we will never see that one-party dominance ever again in South Africa.
Yeah, it's going to be a transition process that's going to take some time. My sense is that this will crystallize at about 2034 in terms of what it is morphing to be. It's not uncommon from this entire process to have born a two-party state, because they could well consolidate. I mean, we have to watch how these parties are going to form coalitions now. They recognize that they're stronger together. And as that strength is made, now it's interesting about political processes, is that you are self-assertive, and this is by the way a character of systems. You are self-assertive and autonomous, but the way you interact with the system redefines you also.
Yeah.
So my sense is that this process of coalescing is not just about crafting ways in which to collaborate among themselves, but it's going to be defining for each of the prospective
but
coalition
one wonders
parties.
if the electorate will accept that redefinition, because they strictly voted for particular parties and their policies. Whatever was in their manifesto is what they wanted. If it's radical policies of the EFF, that's what they wanted. But now if you're going to have this redefinition where most of the parties are watering down their policy positions, it might become a problem for the electorate. And